Welcome to This Explainer. If you're a newer counselor, or honestly even a seasoned one looking to sharpen your skills, step right up to the whiteboard with me. We're going to look at a moment in therapy that almost everyone gets wrong at first. Let's just dive right into a very familiar role play.
First up, the checklist trap. Set the scene in your mind for a second. The session is winding down, the clock is ticking, and a well-meaning new counselor is trying to wrap up. They look at the client and say, "Okay, so you mentioned drinking more on weekends, you said work has been stressful, and you also brought up your mom. Did I get that right?" Think about the tone there. It's clunky, it's mechanical. They are essentially just listing off facts to prove they were awake.
And how does the client respond? The client just says, "Yeah." And you can literally feel the air leave the room, right? The client's reaction is completely detached. They're checked out. The therapeutic relationship, which you work so incredibly hard to build over the entire session, just deflated. Because, well, they feel like they were just read a receipt of their own life.
So this brings us to the central mystery of our explainer today. Why do our summaries so often sound like a checklist, and what should they actually be doing instead? Look, when we just parrot back information, we are missing a massive opportunity to build trust and momentum. Let's break down exactly what went wrong on the whiteboard. If you think about it, visually, this approach is completely flat. By treating the summary as a series of bullet points, drinking on weekends, stressful work, mom issues, we are treating the client's complex, emotionally heavy life like a grocery list. It has zero shape, it has absolutely no direction. It doesn't tell a story, it just reports data. Let's fix it. Let's look at a better way to wrap.
I want you to mentally erase that bulleted checklist. Let's rewind our simulation back to that exact same moment and transform that list into a cohesive narrative. Listen to the difference here. It sounds like the tension with your mom and the stress at work are building up, and weekend drinking has become the main way you find relief. What do you think happens next? You feel that shift in energy? We wove the threads together to show cause and effect and pointed the client straight forward.
This brilliantly illustrates the core difference. Notice the trap on the left, listing independent, isolated facts. It's static. Now compare that to the goal on the right, weaving threads into a cohesive narrative direction. A real summary doesn't just look backward, It links the pieces together so the client can see their own picture more clearly, setting up the very next step.
Moving on to Scenario 2, Mixed Feelings.
Let's see how this builds when things get a bit more complicated, like when a client is experiencing intense ambivalence about their marijuana use. Here is the wrong way to summarize this. So, you want to quit smoking pot because of your daughter's asthma, but you also said you can't because all your friends smoke. Once again, it's just mechanical repetition. By stating the conflict like a math problem, you are essentially stranding the client right in the middle of their own roadblock.
The absolutely crucial point here is understanding what happens when you do this. If you simply parrot the roadblock back to them, you are inadvertently reinforcing their resistance and highlighting the status quo side of their brain. To get to the goal, we need to acknowledge the struggle safely, but intentionally highlight their deeper core values.
Let's look at what a true ambivalence summary sounds like. Because your friends all smoke, quitting feels isolating. Yet, protecting your daughter's asthma is deeply important to you as a parent. Where does that leave us? Notice how we validate their struggle, that it feels isolating, but we shine a massive spotlight on their core value of being a protective parent. We gather the resistance, sure, but we reinforce the motivation to change.
Which brings us to linking, not just listing.
Now that the contrast is crystal clear from our role plays, let's look at the specific types of summaries you should be using. First up is the linking summary. This is where you reflect a client's statement and actively connect it to an earlier, seemingly unrelated thought. By drawing a line, like connecting work stress directly to weekend drinking, you help the client see patterns they haven't realized themselves. You're painting a fuller picture.
Next is the transitional summary. Think of this as your pivot. It wraps up a specific conversation or task and explicitly moves the client along the change process. You use this when you need to gracefully pivot to a new agenda item, or, like in our very first scenario, when you need to cleanly and productively bring the entire session to a close.
Finally, we have the ambivalence summary. This is that delicate art we practiced in Scenario 2. You gather statements of both their resistance and their desire for change. But the real secret sauce is that you intentionally arrange the summary to reinforce their motivation. You acknowledge the status quo, absolutely, but you give the final word to their hidden desire to grow.
Let's talk about building trust.
So why does all of this matter? Why go through the effort of replacing the basic checklist with a woven narrative?
Well, because a good summary distills the absolute essence of the session. It proves to the client that you weren't just recording their words, you were fiercely dedicated to understanding their world. When you paint that fuller picture, you build true collaboration. It tells them, I see you, I hear you, and we are in this together.
All right, one strategy for tomorrow.
Let's completely strip away the theory now. I want to give you one highly practical task you can use immediately. Here is your simple 3-step formula to try in your very first session tomorrow morning. Step 1. Actively listen for 2 seemingly unrelated threads. Step 2. Pause and ask yourself, okay, how do these actually connect? Step 3. Present that connection back to them and end by asking something like, what happens next? Or where does that leave us? It definitely takes practice to stop listing and start weaving. But man, once you do, the depth of your conversations will completely transform. So, I'll leave you with this provocative challenge. Erase the checklist. Look at the person sitting in front of you. What threads will you weave together in your next session? Thanks for joining.